Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to Red Hot Talk once again. As promised, you guys, since 2 weeks ago, we are going to bring in some important people about two exciting Michael 43 Camera projects. One was the Kaira from Camera Intelligence, and the other is going to be SD from France. So SD has promised me that they are going to do an interview, but that's going to be some months away because they want to make sure that they have a prototype to show us first. So we're going to wait a little bit for that one. But we do have one coming in today, and yeah, I'm going to bring it in right now so we can introduce all of you to the man behind the very first AI-driven Michael 43 mirrorless camera. And his name is Visha Kumar, CEO of Camera Intelligence.
Hey everyone, thank you, Jimmy. Thanks, Rod, for having me on again for the second time.
No, not at all. It's very exciting, and I mean, I'm actually very glad to see how much Kaira has matured, since last time we met. And I have personally handled the camera, and I've been testing for the last couple of weeks. So there'll be some screen recording that I can show you guys in just a moment, so you can see how the camera actually work in real life. It's not a full test yet. You're gonna have to wait for my videos to see, everything I'm going to talk about that camera. But today is more about, obviously yourself, Visha. I want you to talk to you about and ask you about the idea behind the whole development. Why this idea came about. So one thing, and second thing, why choose Michael 43 instead of APS-C or full frame? Then of course, and finally, it will be the future of photography. That will be more specific to the impact on artificial intelligence. And why do you think artificial intelligence will be playing a big part in every photographer's life in the future, for instance? So, and of course, Rod is going to be here, and we're going to be asking questions, and you guys are very welcome to join in and participate. And as usual, I know that many of you are joining in probably about 10 to 15 minutes after our discussion started. So I'm going to be looking out for questions and everything like that. So there'll be a little Q&A session towards the end of the chat. But please feel free to write anything in the chat room here. I'm going to take notes on it, and I'm going to ask Visha about everything on Kaira. So let's get it started about the origination of the idea. So, Visha, if you explain a little bit how the whole thing came about, and why do you think about, this camera project to start with? I mean, are you a photographer, start? Are you into photography? Why would suddenly just want to build a camera?
Yeah. So I'm not a photographer myself. I come from a data science background, but I was using data science in the art market. So I worked for an auction house called Sotheby's for almost 5 years. And I worked there as a data scientist, which was a really unconventional thing to do. For a long period of time, I was kind of the only person in the whole organization doing this type of work. And whilst I was there, I got into cameras purely because of content. Because I was the only person that was doing this role, I started to talk about my work more openly, and I built a modest following on social media. And one thing led to another, where I actually bought my first ever mirrorless camera, which was a Sony Alpha A6600, kind of mid-level camera. I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't really know the difference between a full frame APS-C at the time. I just kind of watched a few YouTube videos, and a lot of people were recommending that camera, so I bought it. And then once I bought the camera, I had to decide what lens I needed to get. And the one that all the YouTubers were recommending at the time was the Sigma 16mm f1.4 lens, which I think was a quite popular lens back in 2017, 2018. And so the point here is that I purchased a camera. I spent good money on the camera. I think in the end, I probably spent about $2,500 at the time. And I bought a tripod. I bought audio equipment, like a podcast microphone. I bought lighting. And I started to make these videos, mostly kind of to explain the work that I was doing. But eventually, I started to get paid for my content. So I was actually outputting pretty reasonably high quality content. And whilst I was on that journey, it wasn't just that I had to learn or decide what camera and lens to choose. I also had to decide what video editing software to use. Should I use Final Cut? Should I use Premiere Pro? Should I use DaVinci Resolve, which I'm using DaVinci Resolve at the moment, but I started out using Premiere Pro. And dragging video files into Premiere Pro and then actually going through Premiere Pro and editing those video files is a big task. I mean, especially for someone who is a data scientist who never had used a camera before, really. And so the kind of motivation for building Kaira and building this project is really for the kind of target audience is someone who is basically like me, who is probably felt the limitations of their smartphone, probably wants to expand their quality of content, and are looking into the market right now to purchase their first ever mirrorless camera. Some of these people don't even know, like I did, the difference between Micro Four Thirds and APS-C and full frame and what that actually means. And a lot of these people don't even know the difference between 16 millimeter and what the equivalent is on a full frame versus APS-C, and what 35 millimeter or 50 millimeter really means. They just want the content to look good. And what we're trying to build is a product that offers people the kind of quality that you would expect to get on a entry-level mirrorless camera, but with a much more simplified user interface, and not just interface for the camera, but hopefully now what we're starting to do with the integration of AI into the camera, a more seamless user experience when it comes to editing the content as well.
Right. It's certainly a very interesting idea, and it's very interesting that you started off as an APS-C Sony camera. So,
yeah,
just out of curiosity, of course, being a Michael Four Thirds fan, and also I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys are listening right now and watching it, are very heavy Michael Four Thirds fan. Why Michael Four Thirds? Why don't you just continue with the APS-C? Since you already bought the camera, you're kind of familiar with it, you started with it. Why you move on to Michael Four Thirds instead?
Yeah, so this kind of really comes down to a core philosophy from our CTO, Liam, who, by the way, is probably more interested in photography than I am. I'm more of a video content person, if I'm being honest. But like the kind of the core concept is that, firstly, APS-C sensors, to actually go out into the open market and purchase an APS-C sensor is quite difficult. And also, APS-C sensors, if you look at the unit price of an APS-C sensor, and then you look at the unit price of a full frame sensor, they're quite expensive components to go purchase. So Micro Four Thirds was a smaller sensor, therefore cheaper per unit cost. But it's not just about cost, because the philosophy that I want to get onto was that our hypothesis was that if smartphone companies can get really tiny, small sensors to behave like larger sensors in terms of dynamic range, in terms of low light performance, in terms of resolution, by using computational photography, what happens if we apply computational photography to a Micro Four Thirds sensor? Can we get a cheaper, smaller Micro Four Thirds sensor to mimic the types of characteristics of a larger full frame sensor by applying computational photography to it? And what we're now starting to see is the results of the experiments we've been doing over the years, where we're actually able to get comparable dynamic range with our camera to a larger full frame sensor. And we're also able to get comparable low light performance in terms of noise reduction to a larger full frame sensor by applying computational photography. And one of the things you don't have access to right now, Jimmy, with your testing, is a fully handheld image stacking algorithm that's currently in development right now, which eliminates quite a lot of noise, whether you're at fast shutter speeds or fast apertures or in low light situations on our camera. And so that's a really exciting thing that we're going to be releasing in the coming months. You just don't have access to it right now.
Right, I can see Rod already nodding his head.
I'm quite surprised that camera makers haven't introduced any kind of image stacking technologies so far. I think a couple have dabbled with it, but it seems to me such an obvious thing to do and so obviously successful in phones. I'm kind of surprised that camera makers haven't kind of seized on it a bit more. And I mean, it seems to me that you can use it not just for noise reduction, but also perhaps dynamic range increase by merging in real time very quickly successive exposures, like the iPhone does, for example. I think this is where regular camera makers have dropped the ball compared to smartphones.
Right. I think Olympus does do it, but you have to be on a tripod.
It's got a couple of things, a couple of computational features. Perhaps you're thinking of the high res mode, which is perhaps slightly different. There are two modes where you can use it handheld or on a tripod. I think it works better on a tripod, but I don't think you would say it's particularly rapid. It's not that it's not instantaneous. You can't take the picture and suddenly you're ready for the next one as if nothing had happened. There is a small delay. But I do think it's a missed opportunity to do things about noise and dynamic range, where I can't understand why camera makers haven't done this before, where you can take a series of images very, very close together, so close it's almost instantaneous. Should be able to do that with electronic shutters, I would have thought, and then merge them to get a much higher quality result with less noise or more dynamic range or whatever. So we're in a curious situation where with my iPhone, as long as I can stand reasonably still for about 3 seconds, I can get better shots at night than I can with a regular camera handheld. So it'd be good to see something like that.
So we're going to be shipping that quite soon. I think what we're kind of finessing is just the end-to-end user experience, but the actual output results that I'm looking at are really, really, really promising. And so, so to go back to the question, why Micro Four Thirds? So it comes back to that philosophy, which is that we believe that with computational photography and computational techniques, that a Micro Four Thirds sensor can perform like a full frame sensor at a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the complexity and a fraction of the data bandwidth required to get the information off the sensor. But also, a lot of people complain to us and say that our camera is too expensive for what it is. I don't think we could make the unit economics work if we were using an APS-C or a full frame sensor. The price would only have to go up because bear in mind, we're a team of 10 people in London who are building our first camera our second camera. And, we've been doing this for a few years now. We don't have the economies of scale of a company like Olympus, Panasonic, let alone, Sony, Canon, Nikon, who've been around for decades and even more and have thousands of employees at this point. So Micro Four Thirds is the perfect sweet spot between the computational photography outcome we think we can deliver, the perfect entry point for us as a small company to get into the market. And I think the last point is that we believe that Micro Four Thirds is the perfect playground for some of these fun, innovative, kind of wacky ideas. And we're really, really glad to be part of the Micro Four Thirds community.
If I may add as well, and obviously one of the main advantage of Micro Four Thirds is the overall system size, and I believe Vishal, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Your target audience is going to be people on the move, people who are traveling, people who want to capture daily lives, and it's definitely more on the lifestyle side of it instead of being a high-end professional photographer who using big, massive zoom lenses or long tele lenses. You are talking about people who just like to carry, shove it in your backpack, something in your small bag instead of carrying a massive camera bag on your shoulder, or on your back. So something is very, very different to some traditional photographer might be thinking about what Kaira is doing. So is that correct? This is
Yes.
where you're looking at now. So having a Micro Four Thirds platform is ideal because everything can be smaller. All the lenses that you've been using on Kaira is tiny. The 17-1.8, the 25-1.8, all of these lenses are really, really small, which is ideal in terms of form factor wise, and also the overall weight and size is beneficial for anyone who'll be carrying them around or want to carry them around all day long.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. Form factor, size, really important. As an ex-Sony customer, I guess, who use Sony cameras, I have seen quite a lot of really great innovation happening on the E-mounts, where obviously some of the lenses are getting smaller. Like we see that, but the overall point is that the Micro Four Thirds system has a really broad set of lenses that are small. They are sharp, they're good quality, and are reasonably priced for someone who's buying their first ever camera, assuming we can actually... sorry, one other gripe that I just want to air is it kind of just general issue I have with the camera industry for people who are out in the market purchasing a camera for the first time, which is the incredible decision fatigue that is required when it comes to deciding what lens to get. There's so many variations with all different f-stops with kind of numbers that look like algebra equations to the average consumer. And, people really struggle to understand the trade-offs between f-stop, focal length, prime, zoom. All of that is just a very difficult matrix to kind of make a decision, and you need to also include price into that equation as well. And not just price, you need to think about, okay, are you buying native lenses, or are you buying lenses that are not by native companies? So it's a whole massive thing that people have to the fatigue involved in choosing the lens is so difficult. So what we're trying to do behind the scenes is come up with intelligent bundles. So bundles where we take the decision fatigue away from the customer. So we basically will have 4 options. The option will be the street photography bundle, the vlogger bundle, the adventurer bundle, and I think the last one was the portrait or interview bundle, and that's it. So so we decide the lens for you. We go and speak to lens providers, and we think about purchasing those lenses in bulk with the best possible price that we can get, and then we choose the lens for you. And depending on your use case, you just pick the street photography bundle, or the portrait bundle, or the adventurer bundle, depending on what your primary use case is. And that should make the decision fatigue a whole lot easier to get over the first hurdle for a lot of our customers. So that was a bit of a tangent, but just one kind of thing with the camera industry. And I think Micro Four Thirds offers a broad spectrum for us to offer those bundles.
I think Rod already nodding his head really, really happily there, because we discussed this before.
I think so. If I've heard the term decision fatigue, I've forgotten it, but it's a good description. I don't know whether people in marketing still use the term overchoice, but I think that's what we've come to. You mentioned it with lenses. What happens is that when you have overchoice, people actually don't buy any of them, because they think there's a high probability they're going to buy the wrong one, so they just don't buy anything. And I think this is biting a lot of regular camera makers and lens makers quite badly, because they don't realise they're too close to it to see. There are too many choices and too many ways for the consumer to think I could be making a mistake, and too many reasons to just back out.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we now why Visha has chosen Micro Four Thirds as a platform. So that's good to hear. We're now very certain that we now have one new member in terms of cameras for everybody to enjoy. So I'm happy to see that. But let's move on the gear a little bit now. So let's talk a little bit about AI. And so when you had that thought about building a camera, you know, were we thinking really hard? Should I just build something that is maybe just a little bit more advanced digital camera? And why do you think about using AI just to think that it could potentially enhance a photographer's life?
Yeah. So I think our when we were designing the kind of the blueprints of the camera. So like think of it as a house, right? You're thinking about the foundations of this camera that you're going to be building. And we thought about the foundations of the camera development kind of like 5-10 years into the future. Like, we want to make sure that the foundations are strong so that we can, build an extension if we want to, or we can expand the kind of potential of the development if we want to. I think the core foundations were very much motivated and driven by that philosophy of bringing computational photography to a Micro Four Thirds sensor to get it to behave like a full frame sensor in terms of low light performance and dynamic range. I think that was the kind of entry point. In order to really enable that, we needed to select and decide to select image processing chips, so the main processor, that was capable of doing the types of computational processing that we needed to do to realize that initial kind of vision. And so the Micro Four Thirds sensor, it comes from Sony, and obviously the mount is the Micro Four Thirds mount. But part of the reason why these traditional camera brands have struggled to get things like handheld image stacking working is because the processing chips that they have on their existing cameras are just not computationally good enough to kind of do these things. And so the chip that we're using is from Qualcomm. It's a Qualcomm Snapdragon chip, which typically is used in a smartphone, but we've repurposed it for a Micro Four Thirds camera. And that chip has its pros and it has its cons, but one of the biggest advantages is that it enables us to do a lot of the computational processing and techniques that we wanted to do to realize that philosophy of getting a Micro Four Thirds camera to behave like a full frame camera. Now, what we've realized over time is that the foundations, or the decisions that we made to put that processor inside of a Micro Four Thirds camera were a blessing in disguise, because it also has now enabled us to integrate some even more interesting AI features that have nothing explicitly to do with computational photography into the camera. So we've now recently integrated a large language model into the camera offering. We also have a generative AI feature that allows you to do edits. And so it really stems from that kind of foundation that we set out. And also, when we were first designing this camera, we wanted to make sure that the engineering shelf life of the camera had 10 years in it, because as anyone who's ever built any cameras will ever tell you, it's extremely difficult to build a camera. So you want to make sure that when you're designing the electronics, that it actually has a shelf life of like more than 10 years, so that the platform and the electronics has the ability to actually integrate the technology of the future. And so when we were designing the electronics in 2021, we didn't know that Nano Banana would be something that we could get into the camera. We had no idea that large language models would exist, and that's something that would be interested into camera. It just so happens that we made the right decisions at the time that enable us to really rapidly integrate these new technologies into the camera. But that was the intention. The intention was for the development of the camera to last until the end of the decade, in terms of the processing chips that we had.
That is certainly very interesting from many aspects. One very thing that Rod and I discussed for many episodes is more like a complaint, is that we get refreshes and minor update from camera makers for the past 20-30 years. Like we're getting refresh model or slightly updated model every year, and we think there are many disadvantages from a potential photographer's buyer's point of view. We're just not getting enough upgrade to to buying the new models. And secondly, you're flooding the market with all these new models, and concurrently selling the older models is really confusing to many consumers. So it's, again, back to the fatigue problem there that we have. And it's a lot of things going on. So having something that can last longer, I always think is better. And just looking at all the old film cameras that we used to have, we don't get new models every year, every 2 years. We get one new model every 10 years. So I think that's the way to go. Not only for the environmental benefits, I think it's good. You're using less resources. Things last a bit longer. Generally, I think it's a positive thing. But having said that, there are a couple of things you mentioned there I just want to tap into when you mentioned about AI. It's, first of all, I know I also tested the version 1 camera. I remember that back in the early days, a lot of the AI that you were looking at is very much internal. It's not much that people can see necessarily. Is everything's just behind the scene, like the coloring of the images. Right. A lot of the enhancement is going behind the scene. But now the version 2 is definitely more visible. People can actually use and feel about it because, like you said, you already have the large language model, which means that you now can talk to the camera instead of having to do it the traditional way, tapping, sliding, and do that kind of actions. So that's quite interesting. We're going to show you some a sample in just a moment because I've tested it and it does work. So I think I would like to gain all the viewers and also listeners' point of view, whether you think this is actually interesting to you guys or not, because I'm really curious about this. From a nerdy's point of view, I think it's kind of cool, because you can talk to the camera and actually ask the camera to do certain thing. And secondly, you mentioned about Nano Banana, which is a very different thing altogether. This is more about regenerative AI. So you talk about like actually changing things of the images, very similar to what you see on iPhone, Samsung, Google, whoever advertising these days, removing distraction from the background, changing clothes, swapping faces, that kind of thing. So I can see the changes between version 1 and version 2. Can you just briefly explain, obviously, you mentioned about adding things, you implementing new technologies into the camera. And you also mentioned about you trying to make this product last for, at least a decade. As we all know, that technology is moving very fast, very quickly. New models will come out in terms of like AI models and new technology will come out. For you to bring these features in, do you actually foresee that your chipset, the Snapdragon chipset is powerful enough, you think, that to be able to last that long?
Yes, it is actually, because we're using, so nanometer is a yardstick for kind of like performance for a lot of these smartphone-based processors. The lower the nanometer, the better it is at doing certain computation. That's just a yardstick that the smartphone. It's kind of like megapixels in the camera industry. Like camera brands like obsess over like megapixels, and it's become like a kind of selling point. Similar with like nanometers, although with nanometers, there's actually like tangible benefits that come from smaller nanometer chips. We have a chip that I believe is below 10 nanometers. I think it's like sort of, I always get this wrong, so I don't want people to misquote me, but it's kind of like maybe like 9 or 7. I don't fully know, but it's a very compelling chip that has an octa-core CPU. It has a GPU. It has a neural processing unit. And we've also given it an extra AI chip from Google called a TPU. The AI horsepower of the camera electronics that we have right now is just head and shoulders above any mirrorless camera, actually, in terms of AI compute. But it's also comparable to iPhones that were coming out in 2021 and 2022. So think iPhone 13, think iPhone 14, which are pretty good cameras at the time. So yes, it's going to have the ability to do what we need it to do from a computational photography perspective, because if it's capable of doing it today, then it will absolutely be capable of doing it by the end of the decade. And I think we're always thinking about, okay, do we need extra horsepower? Do we not? It's a really tricky trade-off, because, as I've mentioned before, we're a small company and we don't have the purchasing and buying power of a big brand to go and we're not using a flagship Qualcomm Snapdragon chip, for instance. But those flagship chips are very, very expensive, and you need minimum order quantities. You can't just walk into Qualcomm and say, hey, give me your flagship chip. We're trying to build a new Micro Four Thirds camera. They will say, okay, are you prepared to purchase 10,000? Like, what's your kind of capacity to purchase these chips? And so we need to take things step by step in terms of upgrading the horsepower. But to answer your question explicitly, the chip that we have now is very capable of doing the types of computational photography that you expect to see in a smartphone, but in a Micro Four Thirds camera until the end of the decade. The large language model, the voice control, and the nano banana stuff, these are things that we've got working today in 2025 on the current chip architecture, and it's only going to get better from here, basically. Or better, I should use the word better carefully. It will only get more powerful and sophisticated from here. Whether or not you think it's better, that's a personal choice, but a personal preference, but definitely going to get computationally more powerful from here onwards.
Okay, I mean, I think that's said enough already. I think only because many of you know that smartphones are significantly more powerful than any of our digital camera to date, and that's without a doubt. The things that we've been doing on smartphones since, even I would say as far back as iPhone X, iPhone 10, whatever you want to call that, the many years ago, is already more. Has more horsepower in raw terms compared to some of the 2025 digital cameras. So we understand exactly where you're coming from. I think that it does make sense. So I got a couple of questions here, which is kind of interesting, and I probably want to maybe take a little short break before we move on to the next chapter. Maybe Visha can answer some of these. We got a friend from Australia is listening right now. The vloggrapher, it's my mate here actually. Just want to bring his comment here. So I couldn't find any info on whether the Kaira can be used independently without a phone.
Right. So this again speaks to the fact that we're a small company with 10 people and limited resources. But when we were thinking about the camera, the design of the camera, we had to. We designed the electronics from scratch. We have built the operating system for the camera from scratch, which is Linux-based. It's called Camera Intelligence OS. We had to the image signal processing, so the ISP has also been built from scratch. The product design, like the physical housing of the camera, was also kind of built from the ground up. And adding a screen on top of all of that was basically too much for us to handle. Like, that was just way too much on our plate. And so for us, it made a lot of sense to connect the camera to a phone, because the phone already has a really great screen that's bright. The phone is already a interface that our target demographic are used to using. So remember, we're really going after people who are buying their first ever mirrorless camera. And therefore, these people have been using a smartphone natively 100% of the time to capture content. So they're very familiar with that interface. And it just made a whole bunch of sense for us to mount the camera to the phone and use it as the main interface for the camera. Whether we would to answer the question, you can only really get the full benefits of the camera by attaching a phone to it. Now, it doesn't need to be physically mounted, so I could take the two apart, and you could put this on a tripod, and you could monitor yourself from a distance, and you can use your phone as a kind of remote control, but you can't actually see what the camera is shooting without it attached. So you do need your phone to connect to it. Now, in the future, we may consider adding a screen if there's enough interest and demand from our audience base for that. But right now, you definitely need your phone to see. We thought about whether we would want to do an interesting party trick where essentially you turn the camera on and you didn't have the phone attached, and you could take photos just kind of like completely blind, and then wake up in the morning and see whether the photos are in focus or out of focus. But actually, that was more of a feature that we discussed at a pub, rather than actually speaking to real customers who genuinely told us to build that feature. So I believe it's possible to operate it without a phone, but whether we will implement that anytime soon is probably not going to happen.
Right. Okay.
Can I just ask something about the AI? Because it seems to me you've got 3 threads of AI usage going on. You've got the computational photography, you've got the voice control, and you've got the generative AI that's now possible with Nano Banana. Yeah. Do you have a feeling for, are these two of equal importance or equal significance, or do you see some as being more important than others?
It's a great question. I think it all to answer that question to the fullest extent, we need to get more usage data. So we need customers to use it, and then we need customers to tell us what they find useful and what they don't find useful. We as a team will have assumptions about what will be helpful to our customer base, but it's not until we actually get it into their hands and for them to properly play around with it that they will come back to us and be like, oh, that voice feature, that's useless. Or, that Nano Banana thing, it's kind of gimmicky and interesting, but I don't really use it that much. Or, all that computational photography stuff that you're doing, I don't really care about it. Can you make it so that I can do some funky, weird Nano Banana stuff? So the point I'm trying to make is that the Nano Banana and voice feature is not currently in customers' hands. Having said all of that, when we do product development, we don't kind of sit in a boardroom as a team of engineers and hypothesize about what people will want and what they don't want. This June and July, I actually flew around the world and did 2 months of user research. So I met with about 50 people, from photographers to videographers to social media managers to content creators. And we did interview them. We did face-to-face interviews showing them prototypes and demos of some of these AI features. And alongside that, we have quite a big community on social media and on our email platform. We did about 200 surveys with our customer group. What we found from those insights has informed the products that we've included. So that research that we did earlier this year in Q2 really informed that, hey, people want voice control, or hey, people are interested in generative AI, but not so much for video, but more for photo. So you'll notice that Nano Banana is very much focused on photo, not on video. And we got a lot of feedback from people that we were speaking to that the workflow element, which I'm sure we'll dive into later, but how generative AI can be used for workflows or for removing things in the background, things like this came up quite often in user research, which motivated us to include some of these new Nano Banana in particular, but voice control Just to give you an example, the voice control thing came up when I was speaking to a food content creator, and this person makes sourdough bread, right? And he was telling me about how his hands are all sticky when he's like kneading the bread, and doesn't want to like go across to his Sony camera, and every time he does, he like leaves a bit of like flour on the top of it, and it gets all messy and everything like that. But also, not just like putting food on the camera was a problem. Another problem was that when he'd record his videos, he'd press record at the beginning of the beginning of when he started like making the food, and like 15 minutes later, he would then stop recording because it just took him that much time to like knead the bread and do everything that he needed to do. Then he was going into DaVinci Resolve and editing a 15-minute file, and trying to find the bits amongst all of those 15 minutes that were actually useful to make a 60-second TikTok video. So the point here is that with voice control, he was like, it would be awesome if I could speak to my camera and say, could you record for 60 seconds? And during those 60 seconds, he would do what he needed to do, and he would know that he has a 60-second file at the end of it that he could bring into the editing software. And also being able to record remotely was something that was useful for him because he had sticky hands. So there were a lot of this research that we did informed why we fast-tracked some of the voice control and generative AI into the product. But in terms of importance, I think time will tell. We treat all three with importance. I think importance is one way of looking at it. The other way is like how difficult it actually is to integrate some of these things. It's proving quite difficult to do some of the computational photography things that we want to do. That's not saying that it's impossible because they're on the roadmap. They just take a little bit more time. Whereas getting Nano Banana in basically took one of our engineers a weekend because we're using a cloud API integration. But then it was refined over a month or two with better system prompts so that Nano Banana doesn't hallucinate and do random stuff that you don't want it to do. So there was a whole bunch of like kind of refinement that we had to do with the Nano Banana, but it was much quicker to integrate than has been image stacking, for instance. That's a big beast on its own.
Yeah, but I certainly can relate to your food photographer or food content creators. But even as a normal content creator, you know, let's say if you want to make some YouTube video, for instance, in my case, very often I have to mount the camera on a tripod and I have to step away from the camera, and very likely I'll be 6, 7, 10 feet away from the camera. And of course, I can buy perhaps a Bluetooth remote control to trigger the camera, record and stop recording and things like that. But I do agree, you know, that you know, from a convenience point of view, I can just speak to the camera, start recording, and I know it's starting recording instead of me having to run up and down, back and forth, and get all kinds of things. It's handy. It's definitely a handy feature. Of course, it's very specific use case for the speech. AI speech, for instance, but also at the same time, I could also see, you know, some disabled photographers, for instance, that may find it quite beneficial if they can't really move their arm or fingers. They could still continue the photography because now they can actually voice control the camera instead of having to physically press a shutter button and change settings and things like that. It's like you said, it's time will tell. So we'll be very keen to see how many people will definitely going to use this particular feature here. I got one more question here, a very hardware-based questions. I know you answered me already, but I'll just let you speak to this guy here, some dude. And just jumping in, I'm really interested that they include the USB-C recording to SSD. Do you have that feature at this moment in time?
Yeah. We did quite a big update to the firmware, but in theory, yes, that's one of the things that we asked the engineers to do, which is like, let's say you have a 2 terabyte SSD from Samsung that you want to plug in to the camera via USB-C. It should just write straight to the SSD. That's something quite a lot of videographers, filmmakers, video content creators have asked us for. So Yes.
And just to clarify as well, and at the moment there is internal memory within Kaira, and of course, and most of the video and photos that have been captured will be transferred to the phone, right, wirelessly.
Yeah. So as soon as you take a photo, actually, yeah, I mean, as soon as you take a video as well, it's transferred immediately to your phone. The and you've probably seen that as well, Jimmy, where like basically whenever you take photos, it just automatically appears in your photo reel on your iPhone Photos app. But we also are transferring videos as well. Now, depending on your setup, this can be extremely advantageous. So, like for example, I have a 2 terabyte package with Apple in terms of like cloud storage. So it almost feels like I have unlimited memory. Like whenever I'm recording any videos, it's just sending straight to my phone. And so like I have the iPhone 17 Pro. I have the lowest gigabyte. I only have like 256, I think, on this. But I constantly send photos to my iCloud. Yeah, automatically sends photos and videos. In short, yeah.
I think the same. Oh, sorry, Rod, go on. Yeah.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I think some dude also asked another question after is about whether one iPhone can connect to multiple Kaira units.
One iPhone
Multicam setup.
Yes.
We've thought about this a lot, actually, and some people have asked us about this. I believe that would be, let's see.
There you go.
One iPhone, multiple cameras. In a way, I think the opposite. I think it should be possible, but in a way, the opposite might be a bit easier. So you have like multiple phones, one camera, maybe. But loads of people have asked us about this. We haven't actually done any serious testing in terms of whether you could have one camera controlling one phone controlling multiple cameras. But I can see for live streamers that would be extremely helpful. And it might not need to be a phone. It could be an iPad where you essentially like toggle between different cameras depending on like the lens setup or whatever. So I don't want to make any promises, but all I can say is that it has come up quite often over the couple of years or so, but we just have not like dived deep into that yet.
Could I just ask a very basic vlogging question? If you're a solo shooter, one of the big problems, which Jimmy's already alluded to, is you're not behind the camera, you're in front of it. So it seems to me that this principal issue with using a smartphone, and Kaira, I think, as well, is that the screen on the phone is going to be away from you, not towards you. So you're setting up a shot, you're going to have to frame it where you're going to be standing without being able to see. Am I missing a point here?
You could take the phone off.
But you still have a live view of what the camera sees.
Yes.
Oh, you do? Sorry, I thought you said earlier that you didn't. That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, you do. So like, here's a camera that I have now pointing at me.
Yep.
It doesn't have a phone on it. But I've got my phone here that basically can see everything that the camera can see. So I could be all the way at the back of the room and I can see myself. And actually, strangely, that's where voice control has become really interesting, because I was at a wedding in Switzerland with my fiance, and we put the camera we just rested it on a ledge, like on like a wall or something. And I just kind of told her to get into frame so that I could just frame it on the ledge. And then we walked back about 3 or 4 meters. The photo was composed really nicely. It was looking great. Everything was in focus. And what I did was I spoke to the camera, and maybe we can do a quick demo here. So let's see, is there any interesting that I can point it to? So I've got this bottle here that I'm going to kind of point it to. And there's a bit of a live demo, so it's always a bit risky. But what I did was I said, could you take 5 photos in a row starting in 3 seconds? That's what I told the camera using my voice feature. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, so it's, yeah, the bottle's here. So you can kind of see that I'm pointing my other camera at a bottle. And now I'm going to say, take 3 photos in a row starting in 3 seconds. So did you see that it took 3 photos just then? And thanks. And I told it to start in 3 seconds. But if I told it to start in 10 seconds, at that point, I could take my phone, I could pop it into my blazer pocket, I could pose with my fiance, and it can take some really nice selfies of us, and it will take 5 photos in a row. And then we can look at the photos afterwards and see which ones we like. So we're finding that the voice controls are really helpful for selfies and like group photos.
I don't know whether Jimmy has this because he reviews a lot of camera gear. I do periodically. The problem is if you're using a regular camera, you can set it up. You have to stand in the right position for the camera to focus because focusing doesn't work with the self timer on a regular camera. So you're holding the camera and you've got a remote release, but you haven't got 3 hands. That gets tricky. So there's a lot of running around, a lot of experimenting. I'm sure Jimmy's got a workaround. He hasn't told me, funnily enough, but it is quite a difficult thing to do. So that does sound easier.
It certainly does. I mean, my trick is just basically press record and just walk away.
So what if you need to shoot stills, Jimmy? How do you do it then? Do you just take them out of the video, or how do you do that? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Right.
But I just want to show you guys as well. We might as well just show you some of the screen capture that I was using the speech. But basically, I was speaking to the camera. Let me just go to the showcase. Just do one recording. Okay, here we go. So this is one of the thing that I was testing the camera last week. So I was walking around Westminster area. And you will see in a minute that all of this actually at the moment is different color modes, something that we haven't quite talked about yet. So Kaira has, was it 6 different modes,
Yes.
Fisher?
Yes.
So it's actually very interesting. I do like the colors, to be quite honest, and it does look very filmic. You can obviously decrease and increase the strength of it. You got the similar to what the iPhone has, these color wheels, and you can actually adjust various aspects of it, like shadow, highlight, boost, and desaturate, and basically increase or decrease saturations and contrast. Very intuitive to use, so it's quite easy to do. But what I was really shocked is how responsive it is to the camera when it comes to speaking to it. It does work very well in most cases, although a couple of times I found that he had difficulty understanding some of the words. But I think Visha, you really said that it is something you probably will address when it comes to slightly more specific terms and technical terms for the AI to understand. So hopefully this will improve in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's the kind of what I mentioned before is when interfacing a hardware device with a large language model, you need to build some sort of translation layer, some sort of like communication layer, because a large language model is really big and open-ended. And your camera is not big and open-ended. It can only do a certain amount of things. And in fact, you only really want it to do a certain amount of things. The photographer or the content creator is expecting it to do. And so you need to build this kind of like syntax translation layer. Technically, it's called a system prompt that kind of communicates between the hardware and the large language model so that it's not doing things that you don't want it to do. Now, that makes it more restrictive, but it makes it more precise. And over time, we might find that we expand the system prompt to be more holistic. And some words that you were saying, Jimmy, might just not be in our system prompt. So it's really helpful that you're stress testing it now, because then you can come back to me and say, oh, I used these words and it didn't do anything. And then I can go to my engineers and be like, okay, can you make sure that these words are in the syntax?
Yeah.
Would it be useful to have the so I don't know whether you're putting that caption on, Jimmy, or whether it's the app, but would it be useful to have the app displaying what the camera thinks you said?
Yeah, that's the prompt you can see on the screen right now. Yes.
So I thought you put that in, Jimmy. I didn't realize that was on the app. That's fine. Yeah, that's cool. Then you can see if what you said has been interpreted correctly.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, it does. Yeah.
No, I think it's actually pretty cool that that you can actually do that, and especially, here we go. Sorry. Yeah. To be able to speak to the camera naturally is another benefit, because traditionally we have a lot of voice controls for about 20 years now, but all of them were not based on LLM. It's very traditional, it's hardware coded, so you have to speak very specifically to the computer or camera or whatever to be able to basically the device to understand, to actually execute that command. But you're basically reading out a command, a sentence to the device to be able to understand. But with LLM, you can actually speak naturally, right? It's quite different to what we used to know about speech technology.
Yeah, and so not only is an LLM capable of understanding user intent and then performing the thing that the user requested it to do, but it can, we can alter and we can change and we can refine that particular process. Whereas with these hard-coded voice control things, it's kind of like once it's baked in on day one, it's going to be the same on day 655. But with ours, we can do monthly updates. We are doing weekly updates at the moment for some content creators, just to Jimmy, you're probably going to see an update by the end of this week, perhaps.
Okay.
And so, we're able to do these over-the-air updates. Again, based on the fact the foundations that we kind of built for this camera are robust enough to allow us to do that.
This is just an interesting, I think, for many photographer and listener right now we always talk about, or we always moan about camera makers that not giving us enough updates or firmware updates to enhance the camera's capabilities or to fix something. And what you're doing right now is completely different, in a different model or different kind of practice, because it's more of a computer updates than a camera updates, and the way you do it is going to be a lot more responsive, a lot quicker, a lot more flexible when it comes to enhancing, increasing capabilities, or doing different things altogether. If you want to change the layout, you can actually do it by the over-the-air updates, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And so not only can the design of the app that's on the phone change, but actually everything about the product that we have, we're a vertically integrated product. We own the electronics, we own the operating system, we own the image signal processing pipeline and the algorithms, and we own the app. That means we can make changes throughout the stack at any time based on user feedback, trying to fix bugs, et cetera, et cetera. What you will find is that sometimes these camera companies do struggle because they are not using their own operating system. They're actually using a bog standard Fujitsu DOS operating system from the late 1980s. And they don't actually own it. It's just like an existing camera operating system that exists. And they might own the app, but when it comes to the ISP, a lot of it's baked into hardware. So there's not really much they can change in terms of the color science or the core camera modes that are available. Whereas we can change all of that on the fly at any time based on demand or resources that we have.
I think a point where a lot of camera makers struggle is they get to a point in developing a camera and think, do you know what, this has cost enough already. We're gonna relaunch it as a version 2. Do you think you might find yourselves in a position, say 2, 3, 5 years from now, where you think this constant development is costing more than we can recoup for an initial sales of the camera? Do you think you'll have to think, well, I don't know, should some of these upgrades be paid upgrades? Do we need to do version 2? Because presumably, even if the hardware's got a 10-year life, you can't keep developing it for 10 years based on the original purchase price. Or am I missing something?
Yeah. So obviously we have salaries to pay, and
yeah, of course.
Those salaries are, we have engineers who are dedicated on developing the firmware, developing the app, and over time, if you just look purely on like a profit margin perspective, you could calculate that, how is this all going to be kind of funded into the future? So, firstly, we will hope to continue to sell cameras. We're trying to double the amount of camera sales every year. That's kind of like our internal goal, and in some years it might be higher than that, it might be lower, but that's kind of what we're trying to think about. That in of itself will fund the bare bones maintenance of the camera operating system and the app. Now, when it comes to more advanced things like Nano Banana, for instance, and potentially some other AI offerings, by the way, Nano Banana is not the only thing that we're looking at. We're looking at other things in the market as well, and we might integrate other things into the market. And actually, interestingly, some vendors, so these are software makers, they've reached out to us to ask us if we could integrate their products into our cameras. So we need to curate the kind of integrations that we think will be most useful and helpful for our audience base. But there's always a cost to it. So for example, whenever we ping the Nano Banana API to do an image edit, it costs us money. And we want to make sure that that is the economics make sense to actually offer that. And it's not as simple as, it costs us this much to ping the API, therefore let's do a cost, let's just like multiply it by a number and that's the monthly subscription. No, there's the maintenance of the API, there's security considerations, there's the novelty of bringing this into the camera market for the first time. Like, what's the risk that we have to take on as a brand to integrate this? And then we have to kind of calculate, okay, well, with all of, and then there's the salaries. What does that actually look like in terms of our ability to offer that to our customers? And what will our customers be willing to pay to gain access to that? And so I think the bare bones operating system, like you can still purchase one of our cameras. You will be able to use it as a camera to take photos and videos. And you'll have photos sending to your phone and videos sending to your phone. The upkeep of that is surprisingly straightforward, just because Liam, our CTO, is the one who designed the system. And I don't want to get into too much of a rabbit hole with open access or open source, but in theory, if we were to disappear, it's possible for people to build their own apps to access our cameras, because there is a software development kit that we can actually, we're stress testing a little bit now with enterprise customers who are actually able to build their own apps for our camera based on APIs that we've built for the operating system. So that is something that we could, and we've been trying to think through the economics of like providing more open access to the camera hardware. to developers. We just have not been able to like properly go ahead with that because there's a whole bunch of can of worms that you need to think about when actually seriously opening that up to consumers. But so yeah, I think I think whatever way you look at it, we should be able to persist in terms of the bare bones offerings. In terms of the AI, generative AI stuff, I think we'll definitely need to think around a business model that involves probably right now a monthly subscription. But I want to make sure that that subscription is, we will be basically testing some numbers with a whole bunch of people from our audience to say, does this seem too high? Does it seem too low? Or like what? And then once you test and interview enough people, you get a feeling for what like an acceptable range is. And then we'll need to work back and be like, okay, what can we actually deliver for that price? And what does that product look like?
I think very, very quickly, the generative AI subscription model has become the norm in the industry in just a few short months. It's not to say that everybody likes it, but it is now a standard means of paying for generative AI. So I don't think there's any philosophical barrier that you need to break down with users. It occurs to me that could you just buy a top-up card with 50 AI credits, and then when they're gone, you think, oh, do you know what? In a few months' time, we'll get another one. that might appeal to somebody like me.
Yeah, it is a good question. I feel like, it's kind of like, do you do a cost-based versus we haven't fully decided. We might end up finding the people who just go out and purchase whatever 50 credits just because they want to experiment. And then after they purchase their 50 credits, they're like, actually, this is not for me. I'm not really interested in this. And, maybe what we will probably do is offer everyone like a free trial. So like you could get like a 30 days, no question test. And if it's not for you at that moment, fine. Your circumstances may change. So you may come back to us a few months later or a year later and be like, oh, actually, I did that 30-day trial last year and didn't really work out for me. But like, my circumstances have changed. I'm now really interested in getting access to this. And then, we'll probably have a conversation. But I think the way around that is 30-day trial, no questions, like don't even need to give credit card details or anything like that.
So do you think you would have to charge for the voice control and the computational stuff as part of that subscription, or is that a fixed cost that comes with the camera?
Yeah, so the computation, the stacking and that sort of thing, I think will probably be something that comes with the camera. So the computational photography things will come with the camera, image stacking, 6 different color profiles that you could choose from, but even interpolate between, because we've got this kind of cool interpolation thing. That will all come with the camera. The voice control will be probably an AI add-on, and the generative AI will be an AI add-on, probably wrapped in a subscription. Although we are looking, some of this technology is possible to run. It's getting possible to run some of this technology locally without using a cloud integration. That's extremely interesting to us, and we're exploring that. But to properly explore that to the fullest extent does, cost money and time and R&D effort and opportunity cost. But I'm pushing my engineers every month whenever there's a new model release to just test whether it's good enough to do what we need it to do. Unfortunately, the reality is that the cloud models are just way better in terms of like performance than the local models. The local models right now really suck, if I'm being honest. Like it's not a product that I would be comfortable shipping to a customer. And but the cloud, the Nano Banana cloud model is really impressive. The LLMs that we're using also are very, very impressive. So we feel they are good enough for people to actually use properly. But we're always looking at ways that we can localize some of this stuff. It has loads of advantages in terms of not only better offline performance, but also privacy-related issues. It also has cost-related benefits as well. So we're actively exploring that for sure.
And my suspicion is that people might balk somewhat at having to pay for voice control. I think most people would expect now to pay for generative AI. They might be quite disappointed to find out that the camera didn't have the hardware to do voice control. I mean, obviously, I'm not an expert. It may be much more practical to do that in the cloud, but I'm just saying what I suspect users might react to.
Yeah, for sure. We've got a local model working in test right now in development. It's just not good enough in terms of latency. It just takes too long. Like when you say, take a photo, take 5 photos starting in 3 seconds, it might just take the local LLM 5 seconds to even digest what you said before it actually does the task. Whereas we have a hybrid model right now. It's kind of local and cloud combined, and that works at about 150 milliseconds. We want to get it down to 100 milliseconds, but I totally understand that sentiment for sure.
So what I'm showcasing right now on the screen is demoing the Nano banana. So basically, how it works is Vijay can also explain a little bit more on that. So I took an image, and once it's stored in the storage, and I can just go into the app and basically either speak to it or type on it as a prompt to manipulate the image. So in this particular case, I changed a pear to an apple. And it's all you probably see some spinning thing on the right hand side of the screen. Basically, it's sending up to the cloud, and the cloud will come back with an image, adjust the image. So this is the result. It's actually quite believable, which is actually kind of like what we've been seeing for the past year. All these ChatGPT, all these online AI generative images, they can be quite believable. But what I'm quite keen actually is the color changes. You can swap colors of an object. I think that is pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Can you tell us whether the Nano banana model delivers images at the same resolution as the camera? Because one of the weaknesses of the Adobe model, I don't know whether it applies to others too, is that its resolution's limited. So I think anyone who's used Adobe's generative AI on a normal resolution camera image might come away thinking, well, that's a bit disappointing. They would much rather that the generative part is at the same level of detail as the image itself.
Yes. So the resolution is lower. It's about 720p, I think.
Oh, right.
And in some instances, you kind of look at it and you're like, okay, that's a bit disappointing. It is lower. However, we did a lot of side-by-side comparisons with test groups. And a lot of these test groups, they're viewing content either on honestly, like 80% just viewing on their phone and on Instagram. And it's for those people, for those use cases, I think the sacrifice in resolution and quality is outweighed by just the fun that you have from the tool. And because we have a pretty decent relationship with Google, I just know that there's a model around the corner that's going to solve for this literally in a few months' time. So in terms of resolution, I think we're going to get to a situation where we're using Gemini 2.5 image flash. I reckon Gemini 3 will have 1080p by default. It was a case with all the video models to begin with. The video models were lower res, and now they're getting more and more high res. It's more for these model developers to have a code complete system. And once you have a system that's code complete for a low resolution, you then want to scale it to high resolution and get it more high fidelity. And so I'm quite sure that if we have this conversation in 6 months' time, the point about resolution is not even going to be a consideration. And by that point, our users will be properly using the feature seriously.
I think from my figures are generic and probably out of date, but when I was working on Digital Camera World, it is apparent to the analysts there that more than half of their visitors were on mobile devices. There are people now who never leave their mobile devices to do anything. So the resolution is probably not the factor that most photographers would think it is, because this is a device for a different audience consuming content in a different way, I guess.
Yes, and smartphones have been around for 10 years. There's been a whole bunch of innovation on those smartphones. And even now, the latest flagship iPhone doesn't have a 4K resolution screen. It still has a 1080p screen. So basically what I'm saying is that these features that we're talking about really appeal to, as you say, an audience that's spending 99% of their time on their phone. And viewing content on their phone. But having said that, when I look at, I gave you some Nano Banana examples, Jimmy. Even when you're looking at it on a laptop screen, which I do often, you don't, you look at it and you're kind of like, oh, it's not as bad as you would think. So
let me just
we're a couple of months off, I would say. Yeah, we're a few months off for the resolution to be up where a slightly more professional content creator might, want a slightly more resolution image.
I'm just trying to get another one up.
It's been suggested to me by an AI company that if the resolution goes up, the cost might go up. But I guess we have to wait to see what happens, because the processing overhead is greater.
Exactly. And so, there's a sweet spot where the user's like, okay, it's a three-way trade-off between resolution, cost, and what's like perceivable, like good enough for you to just post it on social and be happy with.
Good enough and cheap enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think this particular one is quite interesting, right? You're changing from day to night. It's quite spectacular, actually.
Yeah, this is a wacky one. So I released a video last Friday on the Camera Intelligence YouTube channel talking about how we're calling it generative editing, how generative editing will affect photography. Yeah. And in that video, I give two examples of photographers who have significant followings on their YouTube channel, who are using Lightroom to achieve some of these outcomes. So there was one British photographer who had taken a photo during the daytime in Liverpool using a mirrorless camera. And then he'd gone into Lightroom and he was showing his audience, and this was probably like a 15-minute tutorial. He was showing his audience how to turn the daytime photo into what looks like a nighttime photo using Lightroom and using the sliders in Lightroom and the masking and a whole bunch of other techniques in Lightroom. Now, clearly, there are people in the traditional photography camera industry that want to do this, because I think that video had like 100 or 200,000 views. And there's many, many other tutorials that I found where people are turning daytime photos into nighttime photos. So this is not like a weird thing that I just kind of came up with. This is something, there's actual evidence of people in the camera community, traditional camera community, who want to do this. But the examples that you were showing, Jimmy, that took like less than 10 seconds. I basically said, turn the daytime photo into a nighttime photo. And using Nano Banana, it did the transformation in less than 10 seconds. And what's great is that the quality and also the key characteristics of the photo, like in particular, just look at the boat at the bottom and look at the text, the graffiti at the bottom, doesn't really change. But it kind of, not only does it turn it from day to night, also adds lights onto the building. So yeah, look, we understand this is very different. We understand this maybe questions a lot of people's kind of core skill set. This is something that's controversial. This is something it's a very different beast in of itself. But the reality is, a lot of people don't. It's not that they don't have the time. Is that a lot of the times people just don't want to invest 15 minutes or 30 minutes watching a YouTube tutorial to do this effect. When actually the first time that they try and do this, they might not even do it good the first time, so they might have to try again and again and again. They just want to like have fun in the moment, particularly kind of travelers, tourists, and consumers, whilst they're on the move.
I think the thing is that if you go on a cruise in the middle part of the year, you're going to be back on a boat by the time it's dark, so you're not going to be able to take that picture unless you can stand on the deck of the ship. When you are a travel photographer, I mean, it's very easy to be all kind of holy about this and say, I must go back at the right time with the tripod, do this and this. You don't always get the chance. You haven't got the time. You're only going to be there once. You can't really control when you're going to be there, and you've only got about 5 seconds before some other tourist pushes you out of the way. So it's not as easy as saying go back at the right time and do it the right way for this kind of photography.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. I think that the tricky thing here is, when we made the press release, I saw a lot of comments online where I think there's a lot of people like, anti-AI or maybe misunderstanding. And I there were a few comments where, like, for example, people were saying a whole generation of people are essentially gonna, generate fake memories of like fake things. And I sort of get that, but I think the way to address that concern is kind of head on, which is like, if you use Nano Banana to turn a daytime photo into a nighttime photo, it will be very clearly stated that it's an AI generated watermarking, which, some people have proven that you can remove watermarking, but this is like an invisible watermark that's very difficult to remove, that you can run through any, and in fact, if you upload this photo to social media, it should flag it as AI generated content. So it should signal to whoever your audience is that this nighttime photo that you've taken is AI generated. Then it's on you as the photographer to probably explain to your audience, oh, by the way, I didn't take this at night. I used generative AI to do this. But if someone had used Lightroom to turn a daytime photo into a nighttime photo, would they tell people that they use Lightroom to do that or not? That's my question. And is it really faking a memory or not? Because, you've got photographers like Ansel Adams who invented techniques like dodging and burning in the studio to create iconic landscapes. Like, was he faking the moment? So,
yes, yeah, to a degree, it's a scale. It's a scale of deception, isn't it? Me and Jimmy have talked about this before. The minute you choose where you stand, where you point the camera, what lens you put on, and when you press a shutter release, you're already controlling what people will see. So it's just a scale. But I think probably what people are most disturbed about with AI is probably two things. There are probably a lot of very traditional photographers who resent a few algorithms doing what's taken them a very long time to learn. But I think there's a lot of other people quite worried, quite legitimately, that this is going to lead to a whole new tidal wave of deception. So that previously you might have a whole industry of influencers who didn't have the skill to fake something realistically, and now they do. So that's a worry to a lot of people, probably me included, to be honest.
Yeah. And it's a genuine concern, right? It's a genuine concern. But I think it depends on your vantage point of like how you view cameras and photography, right? So if you see photography as an art form, you might have a different perspective. Whereas if you see cameras and photography as a way to document reality, and provenance is really important, and what's captured in the image is kind of essentially evidence for what really took place in the real world, Or, there's a third perspective. Like, do you see photography and cameras as a way to promote your goods or services? And depending on your vantage point, you might have a different adoption rate for AI, because clearly wedding photographers are using background removal and a whole bunch of other things because, a lot of the times the client's saying, I don't want that random man in the back. Can you kind of get rid of them? Or artists are really kind of, I've seen that Freeze London's an art fair that was on just last week or a couple of weeks ago in London. And if you go to Photo London, which is an art show, they're experimenting with AI in their practice, and they have a very different outlook on AI. And so it depends on your vantage point. But yes, the reality is we are a little bit more liberal, I should say, with letting people experiment with this technology. I think the main thing is that, look, on balance, we believe it's better to give our users access to this technology, like Nano Banana, than to just ban it outright. And it's only by giving people access to this technology that we can understand how they're using it, and we can learn from their feedback. Obviously, we don't want people using it unethically or in like nefarious ways, but we believe that if we're kind of restricting people's ability to use the technology of the day to express themselves artistically, that's kind of a step too far. We actually want to give people the ability to play around with this, assuming it's done in ethical ways where people are very clearly notified that the content is AI generated or is AI manipulated, and that everybody's kind of on the same page.
So I suppose one of the difficulties you're going to have is kind of controlling the narrative, because right now everyone's seizing on the Nano Banana stuff, and probably you'd rather they focus just as much on the voice control, the computational imaging, and the physical practicality of using the device. So that's the trouble, is that once people seize on an idea, it's difficult to distract them.
Point out that when you talked about ethics, when it comes to the regenerative AI, Rod, I think one of your questions earlier, when you sent to me, was about would you adopt something similar to a similar policy to Adobe, which means that when you use regenerative AI, can you regenerate another human being in the image? Actually like a realistic looking human being in the image, because Adobe doesn't allow you to do that. We just generate something really weird there. When you're trying to ask him generate a person, he would just give you something else.
I think Adobe is exceptionally careful with its AI. So if you ask it to create a person, it'll create something that either comes from an alien movie or looks like Leatherface out of that film. But yeah, Adobe's very careful about you. Adobe's AI won't generate any recognizable branded product. So if you ask it to generate a picture of a Ford Mustang, it won't. Because the trademark belongs to Ford. So is this? I don't know much about Gemini and Nano Banana. Is Google a bit careful about commercial safety? I mean, it gets in the way, to be honest. But I just wondered whether you had any thoughts about that.
Yeah. So Google, look, the commercial stuff is difficult because we need to think about the audience, right? And so like, for example, let's take like everyone knows TikToks and Instagram Reels, right? If or YouTube, if you were making a YouTube video and you put a Taylor Swift song in that video and you uploaded it online without her consent, any serious content creator on YouTube, I'm not talking about fringe people who just do it because they don't know any better. I'm talking about like people who are like monetizing their content as a YouTuber. These are like professional YouTubers. They're getting brand deals. They've gone through agencies. They have representation.
They know the rules.
Any professional they know the rules. They know what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. So like similarly, we see that being the situation with generative AI. Oh, sorry, am I cutting out there, or can you hear me?
No, you're fine.
Okay. So similarly with generative AI, if you are if you're a serious content creator that has commercial interests, and you are suddenly adding Rolexes or like a bunch like other people's like copyright and trademark into your photos and then passing off, you should know that that is not acceptable commercially.
They'll come for you.
Well, yeah, exactly. But I don't think Rolex or Taylor Swift is coming after a Taylor Swift fan for putting a Taylor Swift video of music in their YouTube videos. So I think that's the way to frame it and think about it, is that if you're like a tourist or if you're just like a fan or whatever, then you're not going to get, and if you're not trying to pass it off and trying to generate profits and revenue off the back of it, then especially in like the US and the UK, I don't know what the laws are like in the EU, but like that's broadly permissible. But if you are like completely passing it off and you're ripping off someone else's like trademark or copyright and generating profits and revenues without getting the right licenses in place, that's not great. So that's kind of the way to think about it. But the other thing I wanted to say is that it's in terms of the system prompt. So in terms of like adding a human into the scene, again, this is something that we're really grateful that we have this group of 50 kind of beta customers, or like a test group. We're calling them a test group to bounce ideas from. Like, and this test group is a broad spectrum of a diversified group of people. Where we've got photographers, commercial photographers, we've got artists. We have social media managers, content creators, who are essentially helping us understand how to release the product. So in the art world, you have curators, and you also have tastemakers. And it's the same in music, and it's the same in it's the same in editorial. You have the editor who basically decides whether a particular type of article is good enough to make it in the magazine or not, because it fits the theme of the month. And similarly, if you're hosting a radio show, or if you're hosting anything in the visual arts, you have a curator that's essentially like deciding what the program should be. So similarly, with our AI rollout and with what the Nano Banana is going to be capable of doing, we're working with this test group to kind of curate a sensible generative AI solution that fits within the value system and the value base that we have as a team, but that will also be useful for our user base and won't do random stuff that's not aligned to us as a team in terms of our value base. So for example, we're manipulating someone's skin or changing someone's facial features, particularly things like jawline and nose, like lips, etc., is something that's a bit of a hot topic right now. And we're, these generative AI models are capable of doing, but we're putting barriers in place to stop that from happening. And that really comes from our value system matching with our test group and eventually with our customer base in terms of how this product will evolve over time. I don't personally think, based on our test user group and our audience base, that people want to AI generate aliens into their photos. But if for some reason we have like a large cohort of people that want to do that, we have to make a decision as a brand as to whether we want that to happen or whether they should just go to Midjourney to do that instead.
You could be producing the world's first ethical camera.
Well, look, Rob. I think this is a very new technology, and there needs to be sandboxing from day one, and there needs to be like an open and fluid conversation with customers and users. It can't just be free reign, because eventually as you say, it's a messaging challenge as well, and we just need to be, we're willing to take the risk to put this technology into the product, but we just want to make sure it's done in the right way that's actually useful and not just a complete gimmick.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry, just looking at some comments. But we're going to highlight that and come back to you this side to a screen with your question later. But yeah, it's definitely something to think about. And what I would like to hear is from those who are listening right now. What's your view on what we just talked about, the regenerative AI technology? Whether you think is going to be useful in your case or not, and also the speech technology. Where are you comfortable speaking to the camera in public? I certainly got a few eyes when I was doing that in public.
It's honestly, vlogging in a public place is embarrassing enough. I can't imagine voice control of your camera is going to make it a whole lot worse. I'd had to do a microphone. I found a very isolated spot to do a microphone test. And as bad luck would have it, half a dozen people walked past and thought there was something wrong with me and wondering whether I needed some assistance. So I had to explain to everyone what I was doing.
Yeah, I have to say, for the time that I was testing it, and obviously still in beta, and majority of the cases it worked very well, but there were a couple of cases when the camera couldn't quite understand. Maybe it's my Chinese accent, I'm not entirely sure, but it had difficulty understanding. So I keep repeating the same word, and there was a guy standing right next to me. He goes, "What is he doing?" He keep asking the same question like 20 times.
To your camera, yeah.
To the camera, yes.
Yeah,
and, that was quite funny. But then, I just find it quite interesting.
Does it have the capacity to learn your speech patterns? Because that used to be a thing with speech recognition software, and it seems to be something that Siri needs to do on the phone, albeit very briefly. Do you happen to know whether Google's LLM can learn an individual's voice patterns?
Yeah. The short answer is we haven't had the time, resources to iron out some of those nuances. Yeah. But I am aware that on the horizon, it's just going to be possible to do that. One thing you can do is get in the system prompt. So some people might pronounce Kaira a little bit differently. Or, there might be someone's name that's just pronounced a little bit differently. You can get the LLM to essentially get it to do the right pronunciation based on a spectrum of different types of pronunciations. But whether it will learn and get better based on your specific accent or voice, I think is something that's on the horizon, very, very soon. So yeah.
Fantastic. So I think we talked quite a long time and talk about AI, and I hope everybody has got a little bit idea what Kaira can do and what is also holding for the future as well. Because I know we're not stopping from here, not just about Kaira, but in general, AI is not going to go away. It's going to be here, and either going to have to embrace it or forget it altogether. Because what you are going to see now, and what will tell you a thing or two about Adobe, is already fully embracing AI in all their products now. So is Apple. You can see Final Cut Pro is starting to employ a lot of AI technology for masking and things like that. And it is happening. Surely, at some point, some of the camera makers may start to employ some AI features here and there. It's only a matter of time. So I'm quite excited to see this being firsthand, and also people get the very first opportunity really testing out this kind of feature. It's early days, I must say, but we know that how fast AI technology can move, and look at the development for the last 5 years. It's certainly almost gone from nothing to what we're doing right now. People are using regenerative AI every single day to. Most of them for fun, of course, and there will be some naughty cases here and there, but the majority of people are just simply having fun. I'm having a celebrity girlfriend, for instance. You've seen probably a lot of these posts lately. You got Wonder Woman. You got all of these celebrities, like Taylor Swift, for instance.
I want Taylor Swift in my selfie.
Yeah, absolutely everywhere, right? So it
Yeah.
is here. People are just having a little bit of fun on it, and I can certainly see people using that features for fun. That's for sure. But commercially, I also see a lot of applications. Like you already mentioned about certain removal features. That not even within the AI time, even before AI time, people were already using removal, used through cloning on Adobe
Oh,
Photoshop,
yeah,
things like that.
exactly. Yeah,
That's been doing
exactly.
it for years, even before we even know about it.
Yeah,
How
sorry
long
to
is?
interrupt your flow, but I just wanted to say that those types of features have been available for years inside of
Of course.
Photoshop
Yeah.
and Lightroom.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that the the user interface to actually execute that feature requires a laptop, requires your finger, requires, or if you use a mouse, like it
Yeah.
requires you to fire up that software and to then like basically draw a bounding box and like a mask and like do certain things. What's really exciting and interesting about what we're doing in 2025 is that you can essentially abstract away completely the graphical user interface of any of this software. And you could essentially, with Nano Banana, the more specific you are, the better it is. So you can say something like, remove the man that's in the background on the left behind the hedge. And that, just based on like your voice prompt, it'll only do that transformation. Because what I've discovered is that it's a very intelligent segmentation kind of system on the back end. So the more specific you are in what you want it to do, the better. And what that means is that you essentially get the same outcome. Like the user just wants the man in the background removed, but it's kind of like the way to do it in 2025 and with what we're doing is that your voice is the interface, not a piece of software with sliders on a laptop.
It's interesting the example you gave much earlier about I'd like to take three photographs after a 3 second delay. I know pretty well how long it's going to take me to set that up on my camera, and it's a lot longer than saying it. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, and look, we don't think that this is going to be, but no one's. I think the core thing here is that we are not forcing any of our users to use voice control. We're not forcing anyone to use Nano Banana. In fact, Nano Banana is in our feature is like tucked away in the gallery with a button that you have to like be extremely intentional to like navigate towards and press it. So you can continue to use our Micro Four Thirds camera, much like any other Micro Four Thirds camera, and you could continue to compose as you do, or like set the shutter speed as you do and the aperture as you do, and do the color grades as you want to do in our camera, and take photos as you do. That's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is that the voice is an option. If you want to, Rod, set up your camera and do the 3 second delay like you used to do, good for you. But you have the option to use the voice system if you, for example, are in a bit of a rush, or your hands are busy, or you just can't be bothered that day, or whatever. And so it's an option. And so similarly, Nano Banana is an option that's going to be available to our customers. And we believe that let's see, time will tell whether they use that option more than they don't.
I do have one question. Obviously, this is something that it just came up to my mind about these whole speech things, and is brand new thoughts that I just came up. Would the LLM understand when to execute a shot? For instance, let's say if I remotely position the camera in a bush, trying to capture a hyena coming in to grab a bite. Usually what a wildlife photographer would do is set up some sort of trigger system to trigger the camera to take the shot. But if the LLM can understand that, or the AI can understand that and execute that, okay, I want 10 consecutive shots in 1 second apart when a hyena come into the frame. That could potentially change the world.
Well, that's actually why we rebranded our company to Camera Intelligence, is because our vision for the future of cameras is one where an intelligence lives inside of the camera that is capable of performing certain tasks with you and for you based on your instruction. And we, not just consumer camera systems, like, camera systems that are capable of essentially taking a very specific, complicated request and performing the action for you, whether that action's performed instantly or whether it has to wait for like 30 minutes until a hyena comes. Like the engineering behind actually performing that action is something that we will need to figure out. But in theory, when we were discussing this, especially with a test group, some people said to me that, oh, I tried to take a photo of my dog and it's always out of focus. Like, can I basically speak to the camera and say, only take a photo of my dog when it's in focus? Or when my dog's looking at me. Because people try to take photos of their dogs and the dog's always like looking away or something else. And so I was like, I think that's possible. I believe that should be possible. But only time will tell based on like some of these ideas that you have, Jimmy, and based on like people, if we can build a really strong feedback loop between giving access to the technology to our user base and then getting them to field back actual requests. And the quicker we can get this technology into the hands of our users, the better, because the more requests they're going to make of us, and the quicker we're going to be able to take action. And so there is a somewhat advantage of having a first mover advantage in integrating this technology and getting it out into the market as quickly as possible, because then we can actually take steps to build some of those functionalities into the product, completely based on user usage and user demand. So yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's certainly one exciting aspect of it. I can see that, the possibilities is, I would say, go as far as probably virtually endless, depending, whether that, is entirely up to your imagination in that case. I suppose
the difficulty though is, even though you can get the AI to understand what you want to do, you still got to interface that with the camera hardware. So
And given the fact, so this is where I believe our long-term defensibility and value proposition is. We not only do we own not only are we allowing people to speak to their phone and make a complicated request like take a photo of my dog when it's looking at me, we also own the operating system of the camera. So we are then able to operate the hardware of the camera to find the best configuration of shutter speed to camera trigger motion to actually deliver that request that the user has made. And so essentially, we're not just building a camera that attaches to your phone. We're building an entire kind of camera system that over the long term has a very, very strong intelligence underpinning that can do some of these more futuristic, wacky, interesting requests.
Okay, well, thank you, Visha, and that is definitely some photographers would say that's interesting because we always talk about one obstacle in photography is limited by obviously the capabilities of the camera, but also resources and the skill of the photographers themselves. And at the moment, what you're building at the moment is kind of trying to break those barriers and merge them together in many, many ways. For instance, if somehow, what I just talked about, if the wildlife scenarios we're trying to capture hyenas, for instance, traditionally these require extremely expert setup, and you need a lot of skills to do that kind of a setup as well. So it's not that easy, but if things becoming automated and things can be just becoming a few prompts, for instance, that potentially remove the barrier and many people can get into that type of photography. Just only one example, but there's many, many other examples, for instance, that can be used similarly, for instance, like black and white photography, especially what you demonstrated in your app. You can use the monochrome mode and you turn in the whole thing into black and white, and you see everything live. So like so if you don't like the look, you want to have a bit more black, so you just say increase the contrast. You can speak to the camera without having to faff around with the sliders in the camera settings and things like traditionally can be quite complicated for beginners, especially who have no ideas what do you mean by contrast, what do you mean by this and that. It can be quite troublesome for many beginners.
Yeah, but Jimmy, what I would say is that we still very much advocate for entry-level content creators, photographers, and people who are buying their mirrorless camera for the first time to do basic photography camera theory. Like they need to obviously understand the difference between shutter speed and gain exposure. Like it's important to understand what composition is. It's important to understand contrast versus shadows versus highlights. Like these things, and in a way you could argue that, AI doesn't allow people to learn those things because, they're using this like magic box that does everything for them. I don't think that's the case, because actually, if you look at the app that we've designed and you look at the interface that we've designed, there are icons in there for things like saturation, for contrast. There are sliders that are in there for shutter speed, for aperture, and a whole bunch of other things. So we definitely do advocate people to have good theory and understanding of photography camera principles, because without that, you're not actually going to know what you really want. I mean, again, who knows? Maybe we're going to develop an entirely new theory for how to deal with cameras using kind of voice.
I think where beginners often struggle is going to be with basic visual skills. So if you have an AI camera that can just very gently say, look, perhaps if you just crop it this way, it's going to look better. Or shall I just adjust the exposure for you and introduce these concepts? This might be quite useful to beginners. I mean, ideally, what you want to do is put it around your neck, go for a walk and say, take some nice pictures, and then see what we've got when you get back.
Well, essentially, this is what you can do. You walk around the camera, just speak to it. Take a picture now. When you see something nice, and you take something, just take a photo. Take a photo. You can't speaking to it all the time. But I'm intrigued with this, and I'm hoping that the whole thing's going to mature to the point that it's going to be very slick and very smooth. But I'm sure that you're going to get there. Just a little bit geeky talk before we summarize today's chat, and so we talk a little bit about gear, the actual hardware, whereby some people are still a little bit concerned about autofocus, because it's something that is always a big thing, right? In any cameras, if you have the manual focus, especially people who are used to smartphone, for instance, where everything is done for them, having a bigger sensor, there are a couple of things, a caveat that's going to come with it is like you got a shallower depth of field that comes in by default. So if the camera's misfocus is more or less more visible compared to, let's say, a misfocused photo on an iPhone or any smartphone, because sensor is so much smaller and depth of field is so much deeper, so it's unlikely you're going to spot that on a smaller screen. But with a slightly bigger sensor like the Micro Four Thirds sensor, if you use a faster aperture lens like a 1.8 or 1.2 aperture lenses, you're going to see that pop. You're going to see that subject separation. So if you misfocus something, people are going to see that. And because of that, you obviously need a system where it's going to be reliable and focusing subjects and things that you want to focus on. So can you briefly explain about your approach compared to traditional? Because I know it's not contrast, it's not phase, so it's kind of something slightly different.
Yeah, so first thing to say is that autofocus as a feature, as a concept, has taken many camera brands multiple years, in some instances like a decade, to finesse. So like you guys will know that like Panasonic's autofocus has evolved over time, and nowadays they have a phase detect approach that's pretty good. Sony's been kind of like the leader in terms of like autofocus performance, but Sony has the budget to invest, hundreds of millions into refining their autofocus technique. Now, our approach is not contrast based, and it's not phase detect based because our sensor doesn't have phase detectors on them. It is a it's a new way of focusing that uses AI end to end to kind of assist the algorithm to get the subject into focus. Firstly, what do I mean by that? So there's kind of two stages. There's a first stage and there's a second stage. The first stage of the algorithm identifies what in the scene is the most important thing. There's a bit of a bias right now on just humans and faces, and it's able to then kind of track that face using computer vision techniques. So it's now decided that okay, the face is the thing that's the most important thing. Then the second stage of the algorithm essentially estimates. It kind of does what phase detect does as well. Phase detection essentially estimates how far the subject is from being in focus. And our algorithm estimates how far that face is from the lens, from the sensor. Using deep learning, we've trained an algorithm based on focus stacks that we've collected. So we've collected hundreds of focus stacks, and it runs inference. So it estimates that, oh, that face, Jimmy over there is about 3 meters away. Now, once it's estimated how far away you are, it then tells the lens to precisely move not only in the direction that it needs to move, but to that specific distance. And you might say that, okay, this is like a glorified contrast-based technique, but I don't think it is, because we're using neural nets to do the first and second stage, whereas contrast does not use neural nets in any way or shape or form to kind of, it doesn't even do segmentation. It just kind of like measures really rough contrast between different edges. So we use neural nets first stage and second stage. Now, you've been using the AF recently. It's better than it was, but it could be better. The way we make it better is essentially by collecting more focus stacks of more varied subjects in different scenes. We have a continuous autofocus algorithm currently available. I'm currently testing it right now. I didn't think it was good enough to give to you this week, Jimmy. So you might be lucky and get it. You might get it next week, potentially, okay, or the week after. But it's right now you have a single shot AF model. Yep. We also have a continuous one coming soon. So that's high level on the AF. Happy to dive deep or take questions. And if I don't know the answer, I'll definitely pass off to Liam to confirm.
That's okay. I mean, I think the focusing side of it, I think this is one of the biggest concern, if not the single most concern that I had with the version 1. And but I'm quite happy to see that it's now got a working version that is actually doing something. So certainly it's a good step, and I'm quite excited and probably can't wait to see the continuous focus and see how it works as well. That'll be quite cool to see.
So just a possibly too technical a question. Will the scene ever be so far out of focus that the AI can't tell what it's looking at? So for example, if you're taking a close-up, then you go to a long distance shot, the distant detail is going to be so blurred that the AI at some point is going to hit the buffers and say, I don't even know what this is.
Yeah, I don't know what happens in that instance, but like my logic would tell me that the lens, the AI will tell the lens to move so that it's actually able to detect something that's perceivable. If it's just basically based on the training that we've done, we will probably teach the camera that if you see a whole big blur of like a whole big blob of blurriness, move the lens in a certain direction to bring something that's actually in focus, that's perceivable, and then do what you need to do.
Go from there. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
I've had regular cameras that can't do that. Occasionally, you focus on something so close that they get lost and the autofocus just doesn't know
Yeah.
where it is or what it's doing.
And
Well,
is that like a contrast? Do you know, are those cameras contrast?
No, it depends on the camera. I've had it happen with phase detect too. It depends on the subject matter. As Jimmy will probably agree, bright light sources can be a problem for AF, but I've had it happen randomly with, if you're using a macro lens, for example, and you focus on macro distances, then you're going to take a shot at normal distances. It's so far out that the AF can, not every camera, not every lens, not every time, but the AF can just go, I don't know what's happening, and give up.
Yeah. Look, AF's a moving target, pardon the pun,
of course,
for our user base. The other slight issue that you will know a bit more, Jimmy, as a Micro Four Thirds user, is like there are some really good Micro Four Thirds lenses, but unfortunately they're not sometimes great with AF, like the 20mm, for example, f1.7. Incredible lens. Panasonic, but just really slow motors, and it's not a good AF lens. Yeah. And so you have to deal with that. And then at the same time, there's not very many new Micro Four Thirds lenses being released. Some of the Olympus 17 that I think you're playing around with is good with the camera. I've got this 15mm Leica, which is really like our AF is working really good on this lens, for example. But it's a 500 or 400 pound lens with the Leica name on it. And so you would expect it to be better.
In general, I think you'll probably find that all of the older Olympus lenses, but some of the Panasonic primes are not so quick. The older ones, the cheaper ones. Not slur against Panasonic. It's just how it seems to be.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think overall, from what we discussed earlier in the stream, the target audience of Kaira are mainly going to be those who will be using smaller primes, smaller zooms. It's not going to be big lenses. I think at the moment in the Micro Four Thirds world, there are enough lenses to support what you want to do, and I don't think there's any deficiencies, especially considering the Micro Four Thirds sensor isn't exactly a compared to full frame I'm talking about in terms of resolution. So I don't think you do need anything sharper or better than what's currently available, and that's certainly very sufficient.
I think the 14 to 42mm pancake would be a good fit, because that focuses quite quickly. It's very small and it's got a zoom. So
this is electronic zoom though. This one, isn't it?
Yeah.
So plenty of options. So I think the only last thing to say is, we're launching Kaira on Kickstarter.
Yes.
In a couple of weeks, we found that Kickstarter's going to be always is, but going to be a good place for us to just get a sense of like initial demand and interest. We're really excited about the campaign. We've been putting a lot of work behind the scenes. I shared some manufacturing stuff to you, Jimmy. We've already begun the production of the electronic boards. So before the campaign, we placed orders for our key components that have already arrived at our manufacturing facility. Boards are already being made. We want to get a sense of like how many bodies to kind of put an order in for, and kind of what colors and that sort of thing. Which is where the Kickstarter is going to be helpful. But yeah, that's we're getting close now. We were excited to release Kaira. It's different from version 1. It's MagSafe. It's thinner, and that has a different feel to it, especially with the grip as well. I definitely urge people to check out the Camera Intelligence website. I have the link in the descriptions already, so you're very welcome to check it out. Of course, when the campaign starts, so you can have
more details, more samples, and more things. I'm pretty sure Fisher is going to continue upgrading in all the social media platforms and all the latest updates on the cameras and the campaign. In fact, I'm going to add Fisher's camera intelligence Instagram accounts and all the other stuff as well, so you can see all the latest updates, all the demos, for instance, that Fisher's going to continue updating the accounts for sure. So yeah, I'm going to leave it up to you guys, and but yeah, I certainly find it quite exciting, as a new project, and can't wait to see where it goes in the future. It certainly is a futuristic product, that's no doubt, and unlike anything that we have seen since the beginning of photography, to be quite honest. I think the only thing that I could see that's in common between all the other cameras is that it takes images and videos, but apart from that, the user interface, the how you interact with the actual camera itself is very different, and it's almost like merging computers, into into the camera.
if a smartphone was a camera.
Yes. So
yeah.
I guess for those who've been wishing that smartphone would take better pictures, now we have Kaira. So Kaira is that camera that you can take better picture with a proper lens and a proper sensor, and compared to a smartphone. So yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on again for the second time. It was great to dive into the AI side of things as well, because they are new, they are fresh. It's really great that I have the opportunity to kind of voice how we're thinking about these things in real time, because without actually having that dialogue and communication channel, there's just a whole bunch of misunderstanding that can take place.
Yeah.
But the main thing I want to say is that we believe that the real world, the human world is really beautiful and interesting, and it's full of exciting things, and we want to help people capture the real world in the highest quality, not possible, but in really high quality. And ultimately, we want people to kind of remember the memories that they're capturing with our cameras, because a lot of the times with smartphone photography, you just sort of whip your phone out, you hit capture, and then you might never even see that photo ever again. You might not even look at the photo that you just took ever. And a lot of the times, I would say like 70% of people's camera rolls are just photos that they took but they've never seen, which is a bit of a shame. And so we hope that we hope that by using Kaira, people are a bit more intentional about how they're using the camera, because it is intentional. You have to think about actually physically mounting something to your phone, and then you have to put a lens on it. Therefore, you're going through a quite intentional process of looking to document or capture whatever's around you. So we don't want to use AI to essentially erode the photographic art form. We see AI as a way to lower barriers and also add fun and interesting techniques into the future of photography. And also the intelligence, the voice stuff is something that we're fleshing out as well, that we believe has the potential to have an ambient quality that provides a different type of kind of intelligence that can maybe stir you, guide you in the right direction. So anyway, great to have this conversation with both of you.
No, absolutely. The pleasure is ours, and thank you for sparing the time for us. And I'm pretty sure now, hopefully, people have a bit better idea about what Kaira is and what AI can do. But also, please stay tuned for my demo, because I'll be making a video of Kaira, so we'll see a lot of things we've been talking about, but in a more visual, so you can actually see in action, you can see things happening, and I will talk more about it in that particular video here. But today is more about the introduction, about the man himself, Visher Kumar, and then also the ideas about the whole thing, why he developed this camera here, and what he thinks about the future of photography. So it's really good to hear your voice, and really good to hear your idea about everything and the integration of AI, how it can potentially benefit us as photographers and videographers and content creators alike. So thank you very much for that, and hopefully we're gonna see you again very soon. But don't forget, everybody, to check out Camera Intelligence website in the link in the description. I'm going to add the Instagram account as well, so you can please make sure that you go to click on it and check out all the updates from him. And the campaign is starting when, Visha? For the Kickstarter?
Tuesday 4th of November.
Right, very soon. So stay tuned for that. Yep. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to roll out now. So, yep, I will see you all very soon. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone.